Hello everyone, today I'm gonna review Future, written by Dmitry Glukhovsky. So it's a novel I finished reading at the beginning of the year, and I've really enjoyed it. It's definitely something different from the previous books I've read. It's more gruesome, more violent, more mature, but I really loved it. It has some sort of philosophical tones that you have to ponder upon when you're reading it, and I really enjoyed it. So I thought this book deserved more attention because it's a really underrated book. There's not a lot of attention that has been given to it. Even though the author is quite known, it's Dmitry Glukhovsky. He's the one who wrote the Metro series, so Metro 2033. Most notably, they got adapted to a video game, which is quite good. You should definitely play it out if you haven't read the books. But this book has been somewhat left in the shadows. Not many people have read it. And I think this book deserves more attention, so that's why I'm doing this review. So first of all, this book is the genre of the book is science fiction. It's a dystopian future. The story goes like this. So you're following a character named Jan. He's a mysterious person, which early on, when you're reading the book, in the first pages, you can definitely understand that he's gone through a lot, that he has a lot of anger, and that he's a person that has a lot of issues, that you wonder what's going on, and you wonder how or why he is like this. He is very complacent towards other people. He's very arrogant and treats everyone else with despise and sees everyone else around him with despise. So this character has a mission. He's a police officer who is part of a special forces unit that is called the Phalanx, and their goal is to track down people who have illegal children. So the context of the world when you read the book is that in the future, mankind has discovered how to become immortal. And so the problem with immortality is that it leads inevitably to overpopulation. So Europe as a whole has sort of merged in one big government. So from Spain to Russia, it's one big country ruled by one government, by the Immortality Party. Cities are widespread and nature has pretty much been gone. It's just cities after skyscrapers after skyscrapers that you only see from the window. And because of this overpopulation crisis due to immortality, the government has restricted the right to give birth. If a couple decides to have a child, one of the parents has to sacrifice their immortality in order to give it to his children. So +1 -1. So just to keep the population in balance. But of course, some people have children on the side and in secret, without declaring it to the state, and this is where the Phalanx, so the special forces unit that Jan is a part of, comes into play. They're the ones who are tracking down and maintaining order, assuring that there's no illegal children around, so that overpopulation doesn't occur. And Jan has encountered a powerful man called Eric Schreier, who gives him a task, a very special mission under the table. He has to track down a pseudo-terrorist and an activist called Rockamora, who wants to end immortality and more or less give people the full freedom to have children regardless of the consequences. And he's sort of an idealist, this Rockamora guy, but you really get the sense as you're reading on that just because he's portrayed as the good guy at first doesn't mean that he's perfect. He has definitely a lot of flaws, which I'll come back to after. And so Jan is going after his mission, but he's constantly, at first he doesn't really care about morals or ethics. He just lives his life with utter contempt for others. And you understand why as you read the book, because you get a glimpse into his childhood and why he's like this. And you almost feel sorry for him or rather you do feel sorry for him as you read on, because he's a victim at first, really. And ultimately meets a woman that he falls in love with, and it changes everything. His whole world is shaken. And he now questions the whole establishment and his orders, his role in society, and even slowly but surely, he questions immortality itself. And so this is how I could I could give you a synopsis of the book without spoiling you too much in case you want to read it. So that's pretty much the story that you need to hear in order to feel attracted to read the book. Now I'm gonna sort of examine the themes of the book. So the book speaks, of course, about immortality and how, in reality, immortality, if it were to be discovered, would not be a gift so much as it would be a curse, because a life that has no end has no purpose. It has no goal. Because why do something if you can always report it for tomorrow? And this is sort of the message of the book, is that at some point somebody says, well, ever since people are immortal, nobody cares about inventing anything. Nobody cares about improving, about discoveries, about, engaging in anything meaningful. People are so repressed, and speaking of which, people in this book are so miserable that the very concept of happiness is shallow, because people take drugs in order to feel happy. So because sexuality is repressed because of the fact that nobody is encouraged to have children, they take pills, pleasure pills, to feel happy and to give them a sense of happiness that is completely hollow and is not natural in any way. People also take sleeping pills because they have trouble sleeping at night because of how much light there is in a city that is overpopulated. You can barely see the sky in some levels. So that's something to ponder upon. There's other concepts such as religion and faith, because the characters, of course, in this book, Jan at first doesn't have any faith, but as he progresses, he's sort of brought back into faith, into religion, by some glimpses on his early childhood, and that's something really important. I'm not going to talk too much about it, otherwise it's going to spoil you too much. But yeah, and of course the concept of identity is really important, because Jan is deprived of any meaningful identity, and this is the same as pretty much any character in the book. They all have a name, but even their names sometimes are made up, and everything is really sort of, because there's so many people, the concept of individuality is really shallow, and Jan especially lives his life searching for his identity, his purpose. And I really liked it how it concluded in the end, because one thing I have to say is that Jan doesn't know his parents, and he is constantly trying to remember who they were, or who they are rather, but at the same time he doesn't want to, because he is afraid that it might bring bad memories or bad news. And this is something important to keep in mind when you're reading the book. The other thing is that in this book, when you're reading it, you're sort of struck by the front cover of the novel, this mask that you see. For those of you who don't know, but I think pretty much everybody should know it, it's Apollo. It's the Greek god that is somehow representative of beauty, of eternal youth, and peak masculinity kind of god. And the reason why this mask is so important is because the special forces unit that Jan is a part of, the Phalanx, they wear this mask wherever they go. And so they're the embodiment of this sort of Apollo figure, this eternal youth that the society that is so proud of, that the society is so proud of, this eternal youth, this eternal beauty and perfection. But the problem is that sometimes people, when they search for perfection, they lose track of it, because who says that life, especially nature, needs to be perfect? People were perfect just as they were without immortality. It's this quest for eternal beauty and eternal life that instead brought misery to people. Another thing that's really that struck me in this book is that it really is realistic in the way it depicts some key people. So the main antagonist of the book is pretty established early on who he is, and even though he's a bad guy, he still is a victim in himself. You get a bit of his backstory, and you understand why he is so obsessed with keeping society the way it is, not trying to change it in any way. The Rockamora guy, the guy I was talking that Jan is supposed to hunt down, he's also not perfect at all. He is an idealist, somebody who thinks he has the arrogance to change the world, but his actions speak louder than his words, because he's the kind of guy, just as many people know somebody like this in real life, who has an idea and he thinks he knows how to change the world, but when it comes to action, like how are you legitimately step by step gonna change the world, he's not really cautious about it. He's the kind of guy who just says, everything sucks here, we need to change society, blah blah blah, giving ethics and moral lessons to everybody, but he is not the one who is actually taking the care to put things into motion. And this is something important, because in this novel it shows you that just because you're not the bad guy, that you're against the bad guy, so to speak. If you're against the enemy, that doesn't make you a good person necessarily. And that's something really important to keep in mind. I liked it. Nobody is good or bad in the extremes. There's just a spectrum of gray shades from black to white, but nobody's on either end. Some of them are close to one end to the other, but not so much in a very definitive way. Even the main character at first is a complete jerk, and you sort of get the feeling that he's a bad guy, and he sort of is in the beginning. He's definitely somebody who's dangerous and violent. Speaking of which, the language in this book is really something you should keep in mind. It's really gruesome and violent, and it's very mature. There's many sensitive subjects that are assessed in this novel that I liked, but I understand why some people didn't like this novel, because I read a bit in the blogs just to see who the opinions of other people, to get a bit of a different perspective from mine, and I saw that really there's only two kinds of people in this who read this novel. There's either the people who loved it and really loved it, or hated it completely. And the people who hated it, they hated it mainly because they were offended by the novel. They thought the novel was too offensive for them. There were some parts of the novel where the character comes across different people, and he is despising them. And they thought the character was a bit misogynistic, discriminatory, etc. Which is true, but this is only because the author wanted to convey the fact that a society like this would make people like that, and that at the end of the day, it's only a manifestation of the broader problem rather than the problem itself. And I liked that. So I understand why some people didn't like it, but I don't think it's a legitimate reason. I think that if you're even remotely mature, you wouldn't feel triggered by this novel. You would in fact absorb it and really understand why people are like that. So yeah, the people who liked it, like me, they thought it was because this novel doesn't shy away, especially the author doesn't shy away from speaking the truth and just explaining things as they are, even when things get a bit offensive, so to speak. So that's pretty much what I had to say about this novel. I really loved it. I think you should definitely read it if you haven't. If you don't like dystopias and futuristic books, then don't pick it, because it's really heavy on this. But otherwise, I think this novel is really good. It's really mature. It does make for a great read. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. So thank you. I'm gonna make other reviews soon. If you liked those reviews with my face discovered, just write it in the comments. I'm gonna keep making them. And yeah, so have a good day.